name's Danielle Padley. I'm the musical director of Kol Echad, which is the Jewish choir in Cambridge, and I'm also a PhD student at Jesus College and the music faculty. So the broad topic is actually 19th century synagogue music, and I'm focusing on a particular composer and musician called Charles Garland Verrinder, who was born in 1834. He wasn't actually Jewish, he was an Anglican trained musician, but ended up working as the first organist at the West London Synagogue, and ended up working there for about 45 years as their organist and choir master. He wrote music for the choir, he promoted Jewish music to the wider non-Jewish community. So I'm kind of using him as a case study to investigate how Jewish music interacted with the wider Victorian society. I think he was quite a shrewd businessman, so actually working in a synagogue for him was probably quite a challenge because he wasn't in the limelight in the way that some of his contemporaries like John Stainer were. They were working in cathedrals and big churches and writing lots of music for that, so they were generally much more in the limelight. So I think he wanted to show the wider musical world that he could actually do the same, but from a synagogue perspective. If you listen to a lot of the music of the time from the synagogue, not just his music, but other composers as well, it sounds surprisingly Western and almost quite Anglican. And that was part of the tradition that they were trying to develop. They wanted to match the soundscape of the Anglican church and to prove that they were part of Victorian musical culture. So I think he really embraced that. But he also did harmonise and arrange some versions of so-called ancient melodies, so melodies that you can trace back sometimes to the 10th and 11th centuries, which have a slightly more, I suppose you would sort of think of it as a more Jewish identity. But then, you know, he harmonised them with quite Western style harmonies, and they become part of this same 19th century choral tradition. If you look at his letters and writings in general to the national press, he was quite keen to promote the work of the synagogue and the music of the synagogue to the wider public. And I think it also worked in the opposite direction. So he introduced quite a lot of what we would think of as church musical tradition into the synagogue. So the idea of having the organ in the first place was quite a significant jump for the synagogue. You know, it's not something that's normally heard, and still isn't really. You know, West London Synagogue is still quite unusual in the fact that it has an organ performing regularly on a Saturday morning. But he introduced a few, I suppose, organ techniques and quirks that you wouldn't necessarily find. So things like if you listen to a couple of his pieces of music which have lots of repeated verses, he'll quite often play around with the organ accompaniment sometimes, so it just makes it a little bit more unusual. And that's something that you can really hear in things like Anglican hymns even today. Very nice in the top of page 4. The dynamic and the blending is good.
Danielle's been with us for some time now, and she's wonderful. We were worried at first. She's so slight and seem very young, and we're not easy to control. We're all of a certain age, and she's wonderful. She really is in control. She might be 30 years younger than any of us, but she has an excellent way of keeping us in check, as well, of course, of her amazing musical ability. So we're really lucky to have Danielle.
There are lots of R vowels in this piece, including at the beginning of verses 3 and 4. Really smile on it, get a nice round R sound, so we get That's not a terribly nice vowel to have to sing. So think, you know, whenever you've got a nice R, think pleasant surprise. Yeah? And they come a lot.
I mean as in
I see.
A-H.
It's a lovely, friendly group, and we sing a lot of liturgical music because that's the music that I'm familiar with, and that's what I've brought to the choir. And I think we particularly enjoy singing this sort of 19th century choral music repertoire.
4 and go. Still peace will come upon us. Still peace will come upon us. Still peace will come upon us, everyone.
Kol Echad Echad, it means one voice, so the idea that we're all coming together as one and singing together.
Well, I believe it's ambiguous. It means all together and one voice, depending on how you spell it in Hebrew.
That's it. One more time. There we are. Good. Right. Let's go back a little bit.
For me, it's,
Go back to
and
the
for
English.
me and my husband, Mike, it's a community in itself. We support each other. If somebody was sick, we'd go around and see them or offer help. It really is its own little community. But also what I like is that although we sing only Jewish, Ladino, Hebrew, and Yiddish music, we do have non-Jews in the choir as well. So it's a real wide community feel.
The building is very new. Until then, the Reformed Jewish community in Cambridge hadn't had their own space. They'd been worshipping in a local primary school and various other buildings before that. So it's great that there's now this sort of multi-purpose building which has catering facilities, this beautiful sort of sanctuary space. And I think it's really helped bring the community together.
We're going to sing Esa Einai, for which the music was written by Mr. Virender, and it's the 121st Psalm, and to the hills I lift mine eyes is the English translation. Obviously it's in 4 parts because that's what we do, and it's probably one of the first songs that we actually learned, and we do love singing this one.
It's probably his most well-known piece of music. If anybody knows anything by Virender, it's usually this. I personally think it's one of his most beautiful pieces of music. It's probably my favourite liturgical setting of any that I've grown up with and sung over the years. It can be used, or it has been used for, Sabbath morning services, weddings, funerals. It's sort of multi-purpose, but it's got a very strong emotive core to it. And I think it first was published around between 1860 and 1870. I really like working with 19th century sources because you really get a sense of most of the people that you're working with. They write quite emotively, and he's certainly no exception. There are quite a few heated discussions that happen through various issues of things like the Jewish Chronicle, which was the major Jewish newspaper and still is, between him and Charles Salomon, actually, who'd written this collection of music with him, quite often arguing over who actually owned the copyright to a particular arrangement and things like that. So you do get quite a lot of sense of the people involved. He comes across as quite a shrewd businessman as well as a clearly very well-trained musician. He was very well respected by various different communities, the synagogue community and the church community, but also the wider London musical social circles. But he also seems like he was quite strongly opinionated and could put his foot down when he wanted to. At the end, just make sure that G sharp is sharp, so we don't end up in a nice minor key at the end. Good. I want to do the whole thing one more time.